Welcome back to our Simple Healthy Life podcast, where our goal is to have real, insightful discussions on topics that we find interesting. And today we have a special guest, Miss Erica Christensen. We figured today we would introduce you to the person that puts this stuff together for us. And I'm particularly grateful that we kind of are moving in the same direction of talking to people that are passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
We did a few podcasts a couple weeks ago now, and we found out that only 20% of people do something they're passionate about.
Mhm.
And let's face it, you can tell. Well, we have someone who definitely does something that she's passionate about, and we're lucky to have her doing what she's passionate about, helping us.
Of course.
So if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So just to kind of put it out there, it is definitely very interesting being in this seat right now where I'm so used to being way back there.
Yeah.
So little get used to that for a bit.
Yeah.
But so I started really young with producing, just because that's what my parents did. So of course, as you're growing up, you're looking to see what your adult figures are doing, and just by virtue of copying and paying attention, like just that's what I came to do. So as a young kid, I would always make music videos with my siblings, and I would, direct them of, you're going to do this part, you're going to wear this costume, this is the choreography, we're going to shoot it from this angle, we're going to do it this way. And I think innately, just as the oldest of five too, that easy kind of like commanding presence just came into play as well.
So you had 4 people that you could basically
yeah.
produce with.
Yeah, I
Just
had my own little production house. My dad would always joke saying it's C5 Productions because there's 5 of the children and it's Christensen. So C5 Productions forever.
Awesome.
I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's actually very interesting because I didn't know this about you until somewhat recently, but your whole family is in production. I know that your dad kind of, is really almost like production manager-esque, right? Like to the very high
He's always doing
degree. He's a
something.
very intriguing guy.
Yeah.
But then also grandmother Loretta LaRoche, who is a very popular speaker who speaks on like kind of stress management and
Yeah.
stuff. It has, I mean, she's older now, obviously, but had an incredible following.
Oh yeah, she still has an incredible following. I went out to lunch with her, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and someone came in and recognized her immediately. And that's just something that I grew up with as a kid too, because whenever we would go out, like people would always stop and talk with her and chit chat. And I finally like pulled her aside. I'm like, Nani, can you like not talk to people when we're out, please? So just like a little 8-year-old little girl, just like I want to spend time with you and not these people that randomly know you.
Wow.
But she does have a huge following. So growing up with that, it just became something that I was so used to. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, a little beyond, I think, our era, but that's so fascinating to have someone, back then. I mean, when was this, like 70s, 80s, 90s?
More 90s. Yeah,
90s?
more
90s?
Yeah. I mean, she's been doing it for a very long time, but I feel like her peak was in the 90s.
Really?
Because she'd be a lot on like PBS specials, and she has written multiple books. She has multiple specials. Like, the woman is a freaking powerhouse. Like, and I don't want to butcher this, but she's close to 83, 84. So like, she's still kicking it. Like,
She just did something at the Spire.
yeah, over at the Spire, 85 and still alive.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
she is, that was the name of her show. And she crushed it. She absolutely crushed it. So it's really cool to see that, like, I come from a lineage of people that are just like constantly in the spotlight, constantly putting things on, always making connections, networking with people. Like, everybody knows my father. Like, anytime I bring up my parents' names, they're like, "Oh, I used to work with him." I'm like, "Of course you did. Of course you did." So it's just always there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but they also appear to have taught you, and you have got to see them be passionate about what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
They can hear it in your voice.
Yeah,
They can
so
see it in your face.
I get I love my family. I really do. And I love my parents dearly. And I am so grateful for the way that they raised me and raised my siblings. And, I have to contribute a lot of course, like I did my own work and all of that, but I really do have to contribute a lot of my success to my parents because of the way that they raised me. And again, being the oldest of 5, you are just put in that position right away of just, you have to mature fast. You're watching your siblings, you're paying attention to everything. And like my mom would joke of just saying, you see things that others don't, you know. So being able to pick up on those little things has definitely tremendously helped me in my production line of work as well, because there are certain things that people don't catch. And funny little thing, whenever I would watch movies with my family when I was going through college and like figuring out what I wanted to do, I started taking like a continuity class. And every time there was something wrong in a movie, like I would call it out. And it got to the point where my family was like, can you like not talk during the movies, please? I'm like, but I see it now and I have to say it. So I can't help it. I can't help it.
Yeah. So you've kind of like naturally developed the eye for a lot of those like cinematic and production and storytelling kind of bits, which is so interesting. And it makes me think about how, and this is a thought that probably extends beyond this specific subject matter, but we all have skills that are almost like hidden, and not hidden in the sense that like we have to then, like unlock them. But I think we have skills in which we have, but they're not exactly tangible. And so as I think about your history, right, you've grown up in this family of production, and you did a lot of like fun little music videos and all these kinds of things, developing the skill of visual storytelling and fluency in Adobe Premiere or whatever it might be. I don't know if that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, pretty good, yeah. So, but you developed all these skills, and had you not taken the next step and say, well, let me do this, those skills would have been dormant in some way. And I think, yeah, you're unique in the sense that you have that production, visual storytelling mix of skills, but I think that's true for everyone. I think people have these skills that they just don't give enough credit to, because it's not exactly an overt thing. Like I have this, I'm level 100 in this skill. It's like, how do you measure it in a tangible way? So part of, we've had discussions on passion and unlocking that and pursuit of that, I suppose. I think it's an interesting topic for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So tell me a little bit about the storytelling. So I don't, before we started this, I actually didn't know what a producer did. I saw the name on the, producer, director, and then like the actors, right? That's literally go. And then I got to here, and I realized that there was so much to it, right? So much more that I just, of course, had no insight into. But less of the nuts and bolts and more of like the storytelling. Like you do such a great job for us producing this, making sure that we talked about the color and the light, and I know that's part of it, but actually showing a visual story.
Yeah. So I've, like I said, I've always loved the art of storytelling, whether that's actually verbally speaking it or physically showing it. And there's something to be said about visually showing a story, because there's a lot of different components that come with it. You have your plot, you have your character, you have the different angles that you have to kind of go with, you have your color scheme, your lighting, how is the audience going to perceive this information? So there's a lot of things at play that you have to take into consideration. And a lot of people are like, oh, making movies are easy. Oh, putting together packages is easy. You just do this, you do that. It's like, no, there's so much that goes into it that you really don't recognize. And a lot of it is pre-planning. Yes, you have the knowledge of this is what I want to do, but are you actually able to execute it correctly? And there are certain things that people are able to do that just like, all right, I'm going to tell a story, but it's just going to be one person sitting in a chair doing nothing. That's still telling a story, but it's at the baseline level. And then there are other people that are doing all of these things. They've got all these moving pieces. They've got these incredible set designs. They've got all these characters. They've got all these different lights, and the story is completely missing. There's nothing. There's no plot. There's no connection. There's no emotion. But going back to the simplicity of the person sitting in the chair doing nothing, that says everything. It really depends on what message are you trying to convey. Is there a call to action? So, for me, I personally love storytelling because it's another way for you to communicate without actually verbally communicating. There could be somebody that has a hard time articulating their thought, but they can do it beautifully through visual storytelling. For example, I had a student when I worked over at one of the high schools locally. They weren't the type of person that was going to go out of their way to talk to you, but they were an excellent poetry writer. They knew how to write poetry. And he ended up coming into my class and decided that he wanted to take an independent study and do a visual side to it. This kid blew me out of the water where you just wouldn't expect it. You know, he was very shy, he kept to himself, but after reading his poetry and seeing what he was able to put together, like that's why I do it. Because someone is able to tell their message and their story in a way that they weren't able to before. So that's what like really gets me excited.
Empowering.
Yeah, very. And like I used to teach a documentary workshop for middle school students. And these kids would come in and they have no idea what they're doing. None. And you can tell that they were, you know, apprehensive, but they were excited, a little shy, but didn't know what to do. But by the end of the course, they're like, I made this. I did this. And it's really cool to see like the parents' interaction, all the kids interacting with each other. So it is this very empowering thing to do of just, I have an idea, I need to figure out how to complete it, and then bringing it to execution and seeing how it all looks at the end. It's incredible.
So it sounds like you've got to spend some time sharing your knowledge too, teaching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I would like to say I've been an educator for about 10 years. I've been in this field for 16 years, about half my life. So it's well, probably even more than that, considering the fact that I did it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I wasn't teaching at that point. But now I'm at an age and a
Are
place
you
in
sure
my
you
life.
weren't teaching?
I mean,
You
maybe
just were telling
I
them what
could
to do?
Teaching, telling, is it the same? I don't know.
Maybe you were learning to teach back then.
Yeah, exactly. I was still new to it. But yeah, I've been teaching for about 10 years, and it's just something that I absolutely love to do because, again, I love to share knowledge. I might not know everything in the world. I know some things, but I get really excited when somebody else gets excited. So like that's what makes me want to do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, storytelling is so interesting. We had this experience actually as a group, right, where we found out we had put on this kind of what would you call it, like a retreat, right? Retreat for middle schoolers, and we found that when we really focused on the storytelling aspect, their eyes lit up, that they really paid attention. And you actually had this experience the other day too, right, where you were telling stories and people tune in to stories.
Absolutely. Right? Especially for me, recently, I was able to tell my story about going through college wrestling and not being mentally equipped to do that. And the thing that you would never know. I looked the part, I did all the things, I lifted all the weights, and I got all the reps in, but when it came time to be mentally ready to go out there and wrestle someone that I didn't know that might have more wins than me or whatever, I didn't have it. I was defeated before I walked out there. My fatigue, all this stuff. But I told that story, and that was what allowed the group to connect to me, and I could actually see it. I could see them lean forward in their chair. I could see them say, wow, I've got, this guy's talking about something I can relate to.
Yeah.
Which was great because to bring it back to teaching, then I could teach.
Yeah.
Then I could, like you mentioned maybe before the podcast about finding like a concept that people can relate to, and then you can relate to that too, so then you can teach from there. Will we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it is definitely something where, you know, having something that is relatable makes it a lot easier to teach a concept. So kind of like how we talked about before of showing you things at jiu-jitsu, where you had asked me a question of how to do something, and you were explaining how you were having a hard time with X. So we took X and we kind of broke it apart, and we were able to come up with a different way for you to do something. So applying that to the concept of storytelling, you know, again, if somebody has a hard time speaking, they can do it visually. They can do it, you know, by moving an object or something else. So let's just say they are putting together a podcast. They don't know how to actually get it started. That's something where I can come in and teach them and coach them of how are you actually going to be able to do this? We have had multiple people come in before where again, they don't know how to start the podcast, or they don't know how to sit down and interview somebody. It's having a conversation with them, finding out what they're interested in, what they want to share, how they're going to share that knowledge, and where's it going to go, you know? So once you find all of those key pieces, it's really easy to figure out this is going to work for you. We will find that magic recipe that's going to make sense for you. And storytelling is very customizable per person. It's not a cookie cutter thing. You can't just, it's like if you were to look through somebody else's eyes, you're not going to see what you see. I'm going to see what you see or what you see. Mm-hmm. It's all different. So it's the same thing that applies to storytelling. We're going to find what that niche is for you and not exploit it, but like figure out the best way for you to be able to tell it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
So what goes into maybe specifically kind of like a visual story, and you know, why might someone want to be able to tell a story through visual media? I can give examples off the top of my head. I mean, maybe marketing, maybe just to get the word out, or maybe to connect with people, or to garner a bunch of people into a single direction, so to speak, right? But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So with that in mind specifically, a lot of people are trying to convey a message or an emotion, So think of like any sort of drama, there's always two key people that are a part of it. You've got your antagonist and your protagonist, but there's always going to be some sort of conflict that's going to happen, and you need to come to some sort of resolution. So when you're doing these things, there's a lot of emotion that is behind it, and you want to find that commonality with your fellow human being. And that comes back to how is the audience going to perceive that message. So when you're trying to convey emotion, that's one of the big components of storytelling. That's something that you really want to share, because if you've got no relatability to your message, no one's going to watch it, no one's going to listen, and no one's going to share it. We do a lot of communication by sharing ideas and stories and concepts and messages. We want to be able to, share information with each other if we weren't actually delivering a message. If you think about it that way, we always want to convey a specific emotion. And that's why when you get into storytelling, there's a lot of different things that go along with, like, what is the camera angle? What does the lighting look like? What does the color look like? There are a lot of movies out there that always have like either a blue tone to them or a red tone to them, and they're going to convey different emotions based off of what that character is doing. So I don't know if I lost the original intent of your question, but maybe.
Oh yeah, no, I think that was good. I mean, you're speaking to. I like the point about the story is trying to convey an emotion, and then once you can maybe essentially capture that emotion, then the true message can come through. Mm-hmm. We had a podcast, a couple episodes back, and probably is months back now, but you had brought up that a lot of media does try to bring up this almost negative emotion because we are very stimulated by that. So here's this negative story. Whoa, that sucks that happened to that that group of people, whatever. But then here's what we do. And a lot of the time it's like people are funneling messages through the emotion that they convey, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And so I find that to be particularly interesting. And I also like the idea about how like colors and perspectives can also convey a specific message, because it has me think about music, where music is so important when it comes to visual media as well, right? Do you think about that a lot?
Oh God, yes. Honestly, music is one of the hardest things to pick for me, because when you're putting together a package, whether it be just all B-roll or you have an interview in it, you want to have some sort of melodic movement to it, because if there's nothing going on in the undertrack, it can be very stagnant sometimes. You don't want to just have a talking head. It's the most boring thing in the world. If you were to just put somebody on camera and just point blank talk to you, you're going to turn it off. But if you've got B-roll and you've got some nice music going with it too, you'd be like, okay, like I kind of want to hear what this person's saying. But it also depends on what type of music you choose too. So obviously, if you've got something that's very emotional and heart-wrenching, you want to play like rock and roll, because that's a totally different vibe that you're looking for. So to your point, yes, music plays huge into storytelling, because if you choose the wrong song or the wrong type of music, your message is completely lost. Because if you're trying to like pull on those heartstrings, you want something that's like harp or piano or like soothing, very like low tone vibrations. You don't want to play something that's very high and engaging and energetic, because you're going to completely miss the target that you're looking for.
It's going to feel really off.
It would feel very off, and you're going to get all these mixed emotions. Granted, you want to feel a specific emotion, but I don't want to feel confused. I feel confused enough as it is.
So then, out of all the projects, and I can imagine there's been a lot of projects that you've worked on, but which ones would you say that you feel most proud of? Like, is there one that you have in your mind? I know you've done documentaries and plenty of projects here, and I know that Simple Healthy Life is obviously the number one.
Yeah.
But what's the number two?
Okay, fair enough. I mean, again, it's very hard to pick over the scope of the last 16 years, but I think one that comes to mind specifically is when we did the documentary about the bees. That's something, and it kind of goes back to teaching the middle school students of start to finish everything. But one of the things that we did was we interviewed 2 different beekeepers and their apiaries. So I was very passionate about, we need to keep the bees in our ecosystem, because without them, so many different things just fall off the wayside. And being able to take a educational component, not only from the side of filmmaking, but in the side of, how does this affect our world? How does this affect us personally? How does this affect our ecosystem? And having the students learn that was something that I was very proud of. And they walked away with so much more knowledge after that documentary specifically, that it's like, okay, we're sharing a message, we're spreading information, and we're keeping it local. And that's something that is really important, of keeping your messaging local. Because if you don't share your message with your community, it's going to get lost. It's going to completely get lost. There's a lot of people out there that can, yes, they know how to get on the national level, but if you're not engaging with your local community, you're missing so many key players. So for us and for myself, that was definitely probably my favorite one.
Cool. Sounds like it had all the elements, not just the storytelling, but also the educational piece that you can clearly see your light up about.
Yeah. Like I said, I love to teach. I love to share information, and I love to get other people excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, your passion shines through.
Yeah.
It does, and it does for me when we come here. She plays the voice of God.
Yeah.
If we didn't explain that to everybody yet. So she's always here helping us and doing the things on the other side of the glass. So I love it. I do. I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for you guys. I mean, this is one of the highlights that I know you were saying it jokingly, but it is. I love listening to your conversations, and I always walk away with something too, because it's like, oh, I didn't know that piece of information, or it's a different concept that I never really thought about. So it helps me with my storytelling when I listen to 2 intelligent individuals talk about topics that they find interesting. So it's great.
Yeah, and I think it's, and I know that, for the audience and everything, which is very interesting, that camera just moved, so I love it. We got Dan behind the scenes doing that work now. But what is very interesting for the storytelling and passion and everything is that we've had a number of people in a row in a very short period of time who've demonstrated passion to us, and we had that podcast on passion and the discussion on passion, and it is palpable. It's so intriguing, and I find that to be amazing, especially as you sit here, and we had, Brian, past the holistic kind of provider, his passion shine through, and I find that to be amazing. And so I always appreciate people sharing their passions, and it's something that we maybe feel fearful of, but it's always well received.
Always. And to double down on that, this vibration concept that we've been talking about, like, I feel good right now talking to you.
Right.
I feel uplifted. And that's clearly, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to passion and the vibration that you vibrate at while you're doing something you're passionate about.
Right. And to that same point, you always gravitate towards people with the same vibration that you have. And like, I know we've had multiple conversations off camera before that we're just like happy, we're smiling, we're joking, we're engaging in joyful exchange. So like, for example, you've been out of jiu-jitsu for a little bit and you showed up on Monday and I was so excited. Like it was just like, oh my God, MJ's finally here, because it's something that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And to be able to enjoy that together, like, yeah, you obviously want to be with people that have that same vibrational frequency that you do, because you don't want to be with somebody that's like way down here or way up here. It's hard to meet them in the middle. But like when you find your people, it's like, like this feels really nice.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree completely.
Right. So then kind of like navigating to storytelling generally, we've talked about how storytelling is so important to send a message. Outside of visual media and maybe some like the perspectives and lighting and everything, what do you think actually? What is a story? Do we know what a story even is?
What is a story?
Yeah.
Well, it captures your attention.
Yeah.
I think maybe if we break it down the way you kind of broke it down, it captures your attention. A good story will bring emotion into it.
Mm-hmm.
There's some type of conflict and some type of resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that we're...
Change, maybe there's some sort of change. I mean, is it a story if nothing happens, right? So to your point about there's the chair in the middle of the room and nothing happens, is that actually a story, or is that an observation?
Well, it doesn't...
It could be a story. It just depends on what your imagination's like. Again, it's how the audience perceives that story. So I could look at this video of a chair sitting in the middle of the room, but I could put together this whole backstory of how it fell off of a furniture truck and it just tumbled through the woods and like it finally found its way into a studio where it's like, oh, I finally have a purpose. So it's like you can give it a story without there actually being one. So it really depends on how you set up the scene and what that audience member is going to be like, oh, I understand this chair story.
I wonder, now that you're saying this, I wonder, like, when you're in a bad mindset.
Yes.
You're like late for work.
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone here who was late for work, and then like all of a sudden there's like traffic, and the story in your head is all these people are out to get me, and I can't believe that they're all late because now I'm like this story that you literally, including conflict, most time with no resolution, has like popped up into your brain. Yeah. It's like the stories we tell ourselves, right? But when you're in a good mood, you're like, oh, it's
everything's hunky-dory.
Yeah,
it's
everybody's
fine.
out for a nice Sunday drive.
Yeah.
Look how cool that is.
Yeah.
It's like that's the story you told yourself. Zero input as to like what's really happening. But you just keep telling yourself that story. That's pretty funny to think when I think about it that way.
Well, when you're talking about mindset too, it's how you put together your life. Because like you said, if you're constantly going, my life sucks, nothing's good, you're gonna get what you're putting out. But if you flip the narrative on yourself and start saying, I'm gonna be successful, I'm very happy, my life is great, you're gonna get that back. So you're the writer of your own story. So, and I know you've had multiple conversations about, people trying to do meditations and they can't do it and blah, blah, blah. But if you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, and if you start telling yourself that you can do something, you can start rewriting your story. You don't always have to live in the past with something. It's like, okay, this really bad situation happened to me, but that's not me anymore. I rewrote my story into a different book. You're in a different chapter. So anytime you think about it, it's just, you're constantly rewriting yourself no matter what you do. The period is not at the end of the book until you die. So you're constantly writing it. And even after you die, people are still telling your story. So like that's why they have legacies. And kind of going back to, just like the ancient days and the tribal days, they would tell stories by the fireside. They didn't have books, they didn't have paper, they didn't have anything. They only had their spoken word. So a lot of storytelling came from just talking. So when you think about it in that respect, there's a lot of different things that had we not had those traditions or cultures or anything, we wouldn't have storytelling at all.
I find storytelling obviously very, very interesting. Hence why we're talking about it now. And what's most interesting to me is that storytelling is only humans are capable of storytelling, and most modern theories on why humans are the way that we are it boils down to the fact that we can tell a story, right? They've done plenty of studies on intelligent animals, such as monkeys, primates, and they know that monkeys can lie, which is interesting, but they can't tell a story to back up that lie. So, for example, they've done studies or they've made observations where, I don't know, banana falls on the ground in the forest, right? I sound like someone who knows nothing about monkeys. It's like, there's a banana.
We're just trying to come up with a concept everybody
Yeah,
gets.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Banana falls on the forest ground, and monkey in the tree sees another monkey, opponent monkey, enemy monkey, whatever, going for the, again, my primate terms are lackluster here, going for this banana, and the monkey in the tree says, "Ooh, I want that," and so it says, lion. And so they've actually observed that the monkeys falsely voicing the predator kind of alarm, and so then the monkey runs away, and the other monkey's like, "Oh, great, I got his banana." But what makes us different, humans different, is that we could say, "Oh, you better not eat that banana right now because I saw a lion down by the river at 3 p.m. and he's coming up this way, so you better scurry along." But that's what makes us so unique, is that we have the ability to kind of like put events in space that are not right in this moment, and that's what a story kind of is, and that's how we are connected. We're connected in society through stories, whether that's through a religion or through basic ideological premises, and I especially like the idea of how we all have our own narrative in our own story, whether we recognize it or not. You had even mentioned the stories that we tell ourselves, which I had written a post recently on. Exactly, that was the heading, I think, was the stories that we tell ourselves. And if you're persistently telling yourself this story that really probably isn't true, then you're going to be living out that narrative. And I think that's very, potentially very dangerous, but also, full of potential in the same regard too.
I was exploring this recently, and we were talking about instinct, and like how many reps before it becomes instinct. Shooting a double leg, you can do with your eyes closed, right? Like instinct takes over. Well, once instinct takes over, then it just almost is like, well, it's just me, right? It just becomes part of me. Like I could do box jumps right here every single day, all day, no problem, like until my legs were so tired I couldn't do it anymore, but I would never have to think about it. When does the story we've been telling ourselves for so long stop feeling like a story we're telling ourselves and start feeling like our instinctual responses to situations?
That's an interesting concept, yeah.
When does it become when do we allow it to become our identity? And some people would say that is before you're 7, right? Because we know that most of our beliefs are ingrained in us before we're 7. But I would argue, number one, we don't know. But number two, maybe question yourself on that. Maybe question yourself as to if I believe that this is who I am, and is it really just the story I've been telling myself for the last 41 years? Likely to be the second one, right?
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person too. What have they been susceptible to over the course of their life? Do they have other people telling them that this is who they are? Are they easily manipulated? Is it something where they've been fabricating a life by telling themselves little white lies that have turned into, oh, this is my reality now? So you're kind of losing the plot of who you originally were, but because of all of these outside sources and your unsureness of yourself, you kind of start to change who you are, So it really it depends on the person and how strong they are and how weak they are.
Interesting. I never even really thought about this until right now, until you just said it the way you said it. Like, I think about the story I tell myself is like, I'm either like, oh, I can do anything and I'm the best and I can definitely do it, right? And I tell myself that. I tell myself that. But I also tell myself like, oh my God, you're so stupid. I can't believe you did that, right? This is going to come back to bite you because you shouldn't have done that before. And now that you've done it, like there's no undoing it. Right?
Yeah.
But I never really thought about those little white lies that you tell yourself. Well, I want this person to like me, so I like that. That's fine. I like that a little bit. Like I like it or whatever. Or I just want to keep doing this thing, so yeah, I like that. But then down the road, you start to go, I really don't like that.
Yeah.
I thought I did, or maybe I told myself I did, but I don't. And that is something I never really even considered until you just said it that way. But yeah, it's just another story that you had told yourself.
Right.
For whatever reason, you told yourself that.
And sometimes you get so far into the story, there's no turning back. Because like if you're watching a movie and it's like, why is this guy doing this? Why is he like, just do the right thing. Like, please stop. What are you doing? Sometimes you can't help it. Like if you get that far into it, that just becomes your reality. Yeah. So even though we're watching these movies where people are making these mistakes, we're only human. We're telling ourselves that we're writing the story based off of what other people are telling us to do or what our circumstances are. And sometimes you have to do what needs to be done to get to the next page. Like it's inevitable sometimes. But as long as you recognize later on of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that and try to fix it, then it might be okay in the moment. But again, it depends on what you did or what you're telling yourself. So storytelling can go in so many different directions, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral,
To make it, sorry to cut you off, but like to almost kind of bring it full circle, like maybe that's why we watch these movies that that do that, because it is relatable, even if it's subconsciously relatable,
right?
Like to us, like, and maybe that's why I avoid some movies.
Right.
Some stories.
There have been plenty of things that I've turned off that I'm like, this is too close to home, too close to home.
I heard of a theory, and I can't remember the exact name of this theory, but one of the reasons that movies and shows are compelling to us is that we can observe interactions between humans without the observational impact of that. So you can watch something on a screen and look at these people directly in the eyes without them acknowledging you. And there's something fascinating that we like about that. And I think that's true to a degree, to be able to step outside of ourselves into another story and to experience that is quite interesting. And so I find obviously the whole concept of storytelling again fascinating, because I think it really is the core to a lot of our actions. We have this belief, all these beliefs that are solidified at some point, a lot before 7 years old, per the literature. But I think continuously developing these narratives and beliefs, and we need to check that. And one of my most favorite kind of quotes is that if you feel certain about anything, you should probably check that, because to be certain about anything is kind of a dangerous place to be. And being careful about what your story is. And this is why we talk so much about mindfulness and breathing and journaling, and so that you can actually see what your story is, how it's manifesting. And these are not overt things. None of us wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm the guy who does this, and I live this, rollout, and I do this, and I value that. Like those things almost happen naturally, kind of to your own point as you work through the story. But you have the ability to change that, and maybe change is potentially the most powerful thing to value. If you can change and you can learn to love that, then you can learn to change into the story that maybe you're meant to have.
Once you become aware.
Which is the hard part.
It definitely is, because a lot of people are unaware of what they're doing and what they're telling.
And nobody probably to themselves too, right?
Yeah, exactly, to themselves and others.
And you really can never tell anybody that they're not.
Right, because then you're coming into a whole different territory that you might not want to get into because, again, you don't know what their personality might be like. They could be hiding some things. People are really good at masking. You know, they're putting up a front to protect themselves in some way. But if you start to question it, that's going to bring down their whole wall, and you don't know what's behind that wall.
Right. What story are they telling themselves?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think it's super fascinating. So then, if someone's really trying to tell a story, and maybe they're working on their storytelling ability, from your perspective, what are some like actionable things that that people can do to have others listen to their story and have others engage in their story? What tangible, like what can people do to work on that?
Honestly, the biggest one is actually tell your story. Find somebody that will listen, someone that's unbiased, that will just have a conversation with you and say, hey, I want to tell you my story. I want to share something with you that I haven't told somebody. Or it might be common knowledge, but it's coming from a different perspective or from a different angle. Because if you're not actually telling it or trying to share it, it's not going to go anywhere. So having somebody else listen to it, but then also be open to feedback. Because if someone, like if I'm sharing a story with you guys and you start giving me feedback of, oh, you know, maybe you should change this or change that. And I'm like, no, it's my, like, I want it this way. You're not going to get anywhere with it. You know, you can, there are so many times people have been given scripts, a lot of storytellers, a lot of script writers that just don't make it because they haven't found the right reader, the right audience, or the right film company, but they keep working on it. So even if you've been like put down or don't feel as though that you're not good enough, keep doing it. Keep trying. Keep talking to people, because if you keep telling yourself, I'm not good enough, you're not good enough. So you want to be able to share that with somebody. So biggest piece of advice, actually find somebody to talk to about your story. And then be open to feedback and be open to change. Because if you're not willing to change, you've got a problem.
There are more people willing to listen to a story than there are willing to share a story.
Yes.
And so you're saying share the story.
Just share it. Just share your story.
Yeah. J.K. Rowling went to, I believe it was 7 or 12 different publishers. Maybe it was 12
It was a
different
lot.
publishers before Harry Potter got published,
Right.
before it
Wow.
got picked up. Isn't that amazing? Imagine being at the 11th publisher you go to and they're like, nah, your story's trash. And you're
And then
sitting
just
there.
giving up.
Yeah, right.
That
And she-
story would never have been out. We wouldn't have this entire franchise.
This entire
that now,
world.
right, exactly. There's so many people that are obsessed with it. Maybe not for the best, but like. But if she never persisted to get that last one, we wouldn't have those books right now. So even if you're having the self-doubt, share it. Keep sharing it, keep sharing it, keep sharing it until somebody actually accepts it. Otherwise, it's not going to get out there.
Yeah, you got to be resilient.
Exactly. Keep
And you
pushing
can't
it.
let the external forces dictate the story you tell yourself about it,
Correct. Mm-hmm.
which is something I think we can all relate to and learn from, and become aware that we all do it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Some point in maybe your day or your week or your story, your own personal story, we allow that negative self-talk to push us back.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Great. Do you have any last finishing thoughts?
No, thank you. Thank you
You're
for what you
welcome.
do.
Yeah,
Thank you for
I'm glad that I could be on this side for a
yeah.
little bit.
Thank you for sharing your passion with us.
Of course.
For those of you that don't know, she also does share the educational piece too. So I'm learning as well. Thank you. And I'm really grateful. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have any last thoughts?
If you've got a story, share it. No matter how scared you might be, just put it out there. Someone's going to listen.
I love it. I love it. Great. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if you are looking for our other podcasts, you can find them on Spotify and most other podcast platforms. And we will catch you next time. Thanks.